let's get into the next game that I'm kind of revisiting through Game Pass, which is The Evil Within. So The Evil Within was made by Bethesda. Microsoft recently, or Xbox, actually no, Microsoft recently acquired Bethesda within the last year, and because of that, a lot of Bethesda's games have been coming to Game Pass, and The Evil Within was one of them. I've been wanting to play The Evil Within, I think, for like 5 or 6 years. Like, it came out on Xbox One in 2014. Tango Gameworks was also involved, and it looked like a really fun survival horror game that I wanted to play because I hadn't really delved into the survival horror uh, genre in general as a gamer, and I just thought it would be a really cool take on it. But I never really got around to it. And now with Game Pass, I'm like, well, I'm paying for Game Pass, so I don't have a choice. So I played it. What do I think about it overall? I really enjoyed the game. I think that it offered a lot of unique gameplay mechanics and an interesting enough story to where it made the ride a lot of fun, and it also made it. It did a good job of making you feel confused, but in a good way. What do I mean by that? It made you feel like you were going insane along with the character Sebastian Castellanos as the game progressed, but it wasn't to the point where you'd be confused by the story, if that made sense. Like, you could still follow the story from A to Z and also get to see Sebastian Castellanos' life outside of his work as a police detective. So, um, overall, I thought it was a really fun game with some really great game mechanics. The combat is interesting. It's like I said, this game is very unique from other things that you'll see. It's not going to be like Resident Evil exactly. It's not going to be like Outlast. It's going to be it's survival horror, but you're given pretty powerful weapons to take on your enemies, and the enemies, the zombies, are pretty powerful, and they only get more powerful as the game goes on. So like as the game kind of starts out, they're just your classic run of the mill. They walk around, they'll slap you around, they'll kill you if you let them pretty gruesomely too. The game is quite violent. Like, this is the most violent game I have ever played, barring Gears of War as well. It's just this game is so gruesome. Like, when you get killed and you really feel it, and it's like, oh, that's kind of nasty, and it makes your stomach crawl a little bit. So if you're into the blood and gore like this and the survival horror genre, this game, you're gonna absolutely love this game. It's great. Um, but the gameplay mechanics were interesting enough to where it was like, okay, you had enough variety in your weapons. The one thing I absolutely can't stand that games do is the weapon wheel. I'm not a huge fan of the weapon wheel, and I know a lot of games do it, including one of my favorite game franchises, which is Assassin's Creed. But the weapon wheel, for me, is a problem in this game because of the fact that when you are choosing and selecting your weapon, it slows down time. It doesn't stop time. It slows down time around you, which is kind of a double-edged sword because you could say, okay, it slows down time, which is a lot more realistic, but it's also really frustrating because it's like, okay, you have to really think quick. It can be really frustrating from a gameplay perspective to have that mechanic. So kind of have to pick your poison on that one. For me, I'm going to go with the fact that it was frustrating as hell because it I just didn't like it. I don't know how else to say it. It was just really annoying. I think that's why I didn't like it. It was just super annoying because I'd be in the middle of picking a weapon or trying to craft an arrow for my crossbow, and I'd get whacked by a zombie or get killed by one, and it just really pissed me off. So, one thing that I will say that took me out of the game, and like I said, I'm sorry if I'm kind of jumping around a little bit on this game, but um, the one thing that really took me out of the game overall was the fact that how powerful the zombies got by the time the game was over. Like, the very beginning of the game, the only thing that zombies could do was punch you, kick you, they could wield some weapons. But by the end of the game, the zombies are straight up yielding like machine guns and shooting you. Like, they walk and they're like sprinting and they're doing all this stuff, and I'm like, whoa, they're just getting more and more powerful as the game goes on, which for the story, I think it makes sense because of the fact that, hey, as our protagonist Sebastian is going deeper into the mind of this essentially insane person and is losing control, and the person's losing control, so are the enemies that we see throughout it, and they progressively get crazier and crazier and harder to deal with, which makes sense. But for me, it just, from a gameplay perspective, it just wasn't consistent enough for me to really enjoy it. Seriously, when you're having zombies who weren't able to shoot at you at the very beginning of the game, literally shooting at you by the end, it's kind of like, how did we get here? It's almost like it progressed so fast that it was almost like it became two games by the time it was all said and done. It was like you were playing two different games by the time the game was over, and that took me out of it just a little bit. That's a bit of a nitpick. It made sense for the story, but from a gameplay perspective, for me, it didn't make a ton of sense at all. So, um, I'll give my overall thoughts about the game. And I'll even do a little bit more of an in-depth video later on as well, because I realized that the podcast episode's getting a little long. But I would say that if you're into, I would recommend this game to any of you who have Game Pass and are just looking for something different. For those of you who haven't tried it and are really into the blood and gore and the survival horror genre, you're gonna absolutely love this game too. And those would be, I'd say, the two best recommendations I have for this game in general. If you don't have Game Pass, and you just want to try Game Pass for a month, it's totally worth the $15. Or if you just want to go buy it and have it forever as your own copy, it's probably only $10-15 right now because the game is almost a decade old. So, um, who is the game not for? If you don't like blood and guts and makes you feel queasy, I wouldn't recommend playing it because you'll see a lot of it. Like literally, the game, like you will see the craziest gore you've ever seen in your life unless you've played Gears of War. And even in this game, like this takes the cake too. So, those are my overall thoughts on the Evil Within. I might do a whole separate video just talking about a full in-depth review. So, if you guys have played the Evil Within, or have you played the Evil Within 2, I've played both. I haven't played the Evil Within 2 in a while, but whatever you thought about either game, feel free to comment down below and let me know what you thought. All right. So, coming up next now